Hello everyone, I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it to the Data Summit this afternoon. I am doing professional learning with elementary school PE teachers, so I thought I'd do a quick screencast and just run you through what I would have presented if I were there. Um, so as usual, I've got our gifted data versus our county data, and I'll just remind you that I use this standard deviation value compared to the difference between gifted students and regular students in order to measure. I guess I'm measuring whether our gifted students are performing as well as we would predict them to perform based on the way that we qualify them into the program, because we qualify them into the program based on them performing a standard deviation or more above the mean, and so it seems like we want to expect them to continue performing at a standard deviation or better. So I'm not going to go through each of the charts with you because I feel like you're capable of reading and interpreting those charts. And on the whole, we are performing where we would expect our gifted population to perform. And so you can click through grades 3, 4, and 5 and take a quick look at how that went. But I'm just going to focus more on the summary on what I saw as patterns. And so grade 3 overall was very strong across both subjects. Barrow, Chase, and Witt-Davis performed well across all grade levels in math. And then I want to highlight Stroud, Fowler, and Alps because they performed above the district gifted mean in 5th grade, and those are small populations that are not very resistant to outliers, and so that just says that they're really working to make sure that all of the students in those small groups are performing where we want them to as gifted students. Some places where I think we can grow, grade 4 ELA was comparatively weaker. Programmatically, so for our gifted students. Oglethorpe was kind of inconsistent, and they've been a concern school for the past 2 data summits, and we're going to look at them a little bit more in just a second. And then our schools with smaller populations consistently performed below the county gifted mean. And kind of like I was saying before, those smaller populations are not as resistant to outliers. So one student who may have performed really poorly could have brought down their entire average. But also those teachers, because we have a small population, we typically only have one teacher in the building. And so that teacher is often stretched pretty thin as far as where they're trying to collab and how many classes they're trying to work with. So what I've been doing with teachers was a little bit different for quarter 3. I think it speaks to the way that the data team process has grown and been strengthened at the school level, because last year when we would do benchmark data reviews, my teachers would come in begging for their scores. If I gave them their scores before we started the rest of our professional learning, I could just forget about doing anything else with them, because that's how much they were ready to really dig through those student level scores. And this year they've come in kind of telling me that they've already done it, that they've been tracking these students with their data teams. As soon as the benchmark scores came in, they looked at them with their data teams, and so they really kind of already know where their students are. And so I decided to look at it a little bit differently, and we looked at standards instead this time. And so what I did right here is we kind of all got into the same boat. We were going to look at it from the terms of gifted program versus regular education. So I plotted the standard performance here, and if you click through that chart, it'll take you to a spreadsheet that you can look at. And what I had them do is I had them look at these charts where we're comparing gifted performance to regular ed performance by standard. I had them work together in small groups to describe the patterns that they saw. And clearly we're seeing that our gifted performance travels right along with our regular ed performance, which indicates a strong tie between the curriculums that those teachers are using. But then I also had them pick a peak and a valley. So we may have picked this peak, and they're going to describe a strategy that they used with students, or that they might use with students to enrich that standard. And then we also picked a valley, and we described a strategy that we might use to support that standard, or even to provide remediation through enrichment. My teachers did that through our PLC for grades 3, 4, and 5, and here we've got ELA. They also had to try and describe what happened with anomalies like this. And so clearly this is a place where everyone did so well that it got really hard for our gifted score to beat the county score. Grade 5. And then we did the same thing with math. And if you're interested, you can click through that chart, and that'll take you to that same fun comparison chart. You're welcome to play with that and see what you might see too. So then as we were finishing this activity, I had a couple of teachers come up and said that was really interesting to do. It was really nice to see those patterns. I'd really like to see it at my school level. And so I hadn't had a chance to pull all of them for the school level when we were doing this activity, and so I went back after the PLC and started looking at that, and there were some interesting things that came out of it. So here's one school, and I chose this school because this is a very strong team. They are very purposeful in what they do. They come to professional learning every time we have professional learning. They engage with it. They take it back. They try to implement it at their school. They're very purposeful in what they do. And we can see that the pattern still holds. We've got the CCSD mean score here in blue. We've got the Clark County gifted score here in yellow, and then we've got this school's gifted performance here in red. And we'll notice that for the most part, they're a little bit higher than the gifted mean score, though there are a couple of places where they dip a little bit below. But on the whole, the pattern holds. And we've got these three lines that almost travel parallel to each other, and that's what we would expect to see. In some other schools, we see a more erratic pattern. And so here I've got, again, the gifted or the county mean score in blue. I've got the county gifted mean score in yellow, and then this school's gifted score, not their regular ed score, but the gifted score in red. And we notice that it has some kind of dramatic peaks and valleys that are really kind of hard to explain looking at it through the lens of the gifted program. And so in trying to figure out how to talk about this pattern and trying to figure out what we needed to do with it, I decided, well, why don't I pull that school's mean score as well? And when we plot that school's gifted score against their mean score, we go back to having this nice pattern of everything traveling together. So it's almost as if whatever is happening that causes those erratic peaks and valleys is happening at the school level. And so at this point, I haven't had a chance to really look through the standards enough to decide exactly what I think is going on. But it almost feels like it's the way that that school is interpreting the standards. Because just at a cursory glance of a couple of grade levels, it seemed like their peaks represented DOK level 1s. Whereas the valleys in their data were DOK levels 2 and 3. And so it's almost like maybe we're not interpreting those standards at a rigorous enough level in order to prepare students for those questions when they show up on the benchmark. And so my next steps with that elementary team is we're going to review the individual school standard data at the April PLC, and we're going to go through this process of evaluating the peaks and valleys through the lens of depth of knowledge. And we're also going to do some professional learning so that our gifted collaborators can be depth of knowledge experts in their data teams, because at this point, I've got a gifted collaborator sitting at almost every grade level in all the content areas in all the schools. And so if I've got that one person in the building who can be kind of the spokesman for depth of knowledge and kind of say as they're going through those standards, I'm not sure that we're really getting to the depth, the rigor of that standard, then at least that's a voice in the data team process to kind of push for a higher level of rigor with the standards. So moving on to middle school, again, plotted our data here, gifted versus county scores. We've got our standard deviation values and the differences, and you can look through those. Close, our math scores outperformed the county by a higher margin than would have been predicted by that standard deviation value, and that was really nice to see. And I think part of that has to do with we've got those 8th grade students doing 9th grade math, and so those scores typically are much higher and they bring everybody else's score up. Science was strong across the program, and then 6th grade math has continued to be as successful as a cluster service as it was as a true advanced content course. And so that was nice to see, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to provide a little more support for them as we take that into 7th grade next year. And then some places to grow. Social studies was kind of weak across the program, and we're going to make that a focus of some of our PLC work so that our teachers can collaborate and talk about things that are working for them. But again, those teachers also are coming in, and they have enormous caseloads at those schools because we're talking hundreds of gifted students, or at least 100 gifted students that just 2 or 3 teachers manage. And so they came in saying they've already looked at the data at the student level. They've already been tracking it through the data teams. And so we looked at the standards as well, but we focused on science and social studies because that's where my teachers collab. That's where they really have a chance to have an instructional impact, whereas in ELA and math, those are taught by advanced content teachers. And so my teachers have less control over it. And so again, we saw that pattern where we kind of have the exact same performance just at about a 20-point higher level. If you're interested in looking at that data specifically, you're welcome to click through and you can do some comparisons of your own. And we did it for science and then for social studies as well. And so my next steps is, again, we're going to review individual school standards and try and evaluate the peaks and the valleys. And we're probably going to focus on social studies, and then we're going to do some depth of knowledge professional learning as well. Finally, it's kind of odd talking just about gifted data, and so I felt like I needed to look more closely at advanced content. And so what I did is I have plotted our Clark County, which is in blue, our Clark County gifted, and then I pulled the rosters for the advanced content classes, and right here you're looking at math, and I aligned their data so that we could look at just the performance of advanced content. And what we notice here is that we've got just a tiny little lip between the advanced content and the gifted students, and that's kind of what I would want to see, because when we talk about qualifying for advanced content, What we're going to do is we're going to take students who may be gifted or maybe not gifted, and we're going to place them in that class based on a demonstrated talent in the content area. And so I'd expect mathematically talented students to perform better than just plain gifted students, because not all gifted students are necessarily gifted in mathematics. And so that shows just a little bit here in 6th grade, that gets a little bit bigger here in 7th grade, and then in 8th grade we kind of lose the pattern, and I've got some things going around in the back of my mind about why that might be. But we can also look at it at a school level, and so this is the pattern I would expect to see at a school. Here's the Clark County mean for math. Here's the not the Clark County, I'm sorry, the BHL mean for math, the BHL gifted mean, and the BHL advanced content is a little bit higher than that gifted mean, and that difference grows a little bit from year to year as students get more immersed, I guess, in the advanced content class. Then occasionally we have an anomaly, and so here we've got another school, and we notice that in 2 different areas we've got the advanced content classes performing more poorly than just the gifted mean, which is odd because these gifted students are not necessarily gifted in this content area. We've put this together so that we can push those advanced content students to the place where they're capable of learning, and so I would expect that to be higher than the gifted mean. I'm not really sure what I want to do with that data yet. I definitely want to have a chance to work at it with my gifted collaborators, but I think that I'd like to look at it with our advanced content teachers as well, so we can talk about specifically what sorts of strategies they're using in their classes. If you're interested in looking at that data a little bit too, you can click here to show my spreadsheet for quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3, and you can kind of look at how different schools are doing through your own lens. And if you come across any patterns that maybe I've missed, I'd love to talk about them. That's about it, though. Thanks for listening to my screencast, and have a good weekend.